Meanwhile, President Trump giving Attorney General Barr the authority to declassify documents related to FBI surveillance of his campaign in 2016. The president has accused the Bureau of spying, calling its actions treasonous. Here's former Deputy Independent Counsel Saul Weisenberg earlier.
I think probably at the end of the day, very few people are going to be tried, and we shouldn't want our opponents to go to prison unless they've actually violated the criminal law. So let's just get the facts and have an honest broker get to the bottom of it.
All right, so joining us now, Chris Wallace, anchor of Fox News Sunday. Chris, good morning to you. So,
morning to you, Sandra.
What do you think happens with this now that the president's given Barr authority to access all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there were two parts to the declaration yesterday. One was an order that all of the intelligence agencies needed to cooperate with Attorney General Barr's investigation, and two, that he has the right to declassify anything he wants. I have to agree with Saul Weisenberg. You know, there are millions of Americans who think the big story here is that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. Well, after 22 months of investigation, we found out that wasn't true, according to the special counsel. There are millions of Americans who think the big story here is that there was improper activity, abuse of power by members of the FBI and other intelligence agencies to try to sink Donald Trump during the campaign. Now we're going to have an investigation to find out whether that's true, and let the chips fall where they may. Let's find out what the facts are.
So we will, and we'll see if it gets to the bottom of that. Meanwhile, this ongoing feud in Washington, it was really something to watch this play out with the president and Nancy Pelosi this week. Chris, I'm sure you were watching it all. I mean, it's quite a feud, and it's not showing any signs of cooling off.
No, and I have to say, I'm not sure who was trolling whom. I think they were both trying to get under each other's skin. I think there's no question that Nancy Pelosi, when she starts talking about, I pray for the president and perhaps his family should have an intervention, was trying to get at the president. And clearly she succeeded to some degree in getting under his skin when yesterday at that press conference, he called on, about 4 or 5 members of his administration to confirm the fact that he didn't have a temper tantrum, didn't lose his temper when he ended the meeting on infrastructure on Wednesday. On the other hand, the president gives as good as he gets, and he's talking about crazy Nancy and that she's losing it, and he's worried about her. You know, look, as a political reporter in this town, it's all very entertaining, but as an American, you know, what it means is that nothing gets done, and that's got to be concerning, whether it's infrastructure. There are a whole lot of things that just have to get done in the course of this year, let alone the 2020 and the campaign. They have to figure out how to fund the government by October 1st. They have to raise the debt limit or the country goes into default. The president sure wants to get his trade deal, his new trade deal with Mexico and the and Canada, the USMCA passed. So there's a lot of business they need to get done. And at this point, they're not getting any of it done.
We asked Tulsi Gabbard, a Democratic presidential candidate, who joined us last hour, Chris, about just that. Here was her response.
I think it is the hyperpartisanship and divisiveness that people are sick and tired of, that they see in Washington getting in the way of actually doing the people's business, serving the people of this country. We have to put the well-being of the people first in this country and do what it takes to deliver results for them.
We saw a lot of people, Washington writers, writing about just that this week, Chris. Who or what party this actually benefits to have this feud continue? Certainly with the impeachment frenzy continuing on Washington as well, and Nancy Pelosi.
No, it obviously doesn't benefit any party. The one conceivable thing you could say on behalf of Nancy Pelosi is that maybe by getting into this fight with the president and standing up to him and taking him on, that she slows down the move inside the Democratic caucus for impeachment, which I know she thinks is a huge mistake and will backfire on Democrats. In the end, you know, nobody is a winner here. Neither of them look good. The only thing you can say is that the president himself is involved in this. Nancy Pelosi isn't going to be on the ballot against him next year. It's going to be some other Democrat. And if they're able to look, and I say if they're able to look like they're rising above the fray, maybe there's an advantage to him. But at this point, in terms of Pelosi and Trump, they're no winners. And we, all on the sidelines, while it's entertaining, it's not very good for the
country.
country.
Well, it may be a holiday weekend with Memorial Day, Chris, but you've got a big show coming up on Sunday. You've got an exclusive interview with Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham. That's going to be certainly one to watch. And you've also got Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, also House Judiciary. 2 and 7 p.m. Eastern time right here on the Fox News Channel. That's on Sunday. Chris, final thoughts from you as we look forward to seeing you this weekend.
Well, just remember, I know that watching a political talk show on Sunday morning is not the top thing to do, but you can DVR it and watch it at your leisure that day.
And
happy Memorial Day to everybody out there. And I would just say one real quick thing. Everybody needs to remember on Memorial Day what it's really all about, which is honoring the service of our fallen veterans.
It's a great thing to end on, and we all appreciate and we thank our servicemen and women every day. Chris Wallace, thank you.
Tell you what, I've been watching her, and I have been watching her for a long period of time. She's not the same person. She's lost it.
Now this time, another temper tantrum. Again, I pray for the President of the United States. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country.
So we had a back and forth all day yesterday. President Trump, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi escalating their personal feud. As the drama plays out, Congress is trying to get down to business. What about that business? Our headliner is presidential candidate and Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard out of Hawaii, and aloha. And welcome back to America's Newsroom. So Peter King said they've had a short-term breakup. How do you characterize it?
Look, I think it is the hyperpartisanship and divisiveness that people are sick and tired of, that they see in Washington getting in the way of actually doing the people's business, serving the people of this country. There is so much that needs to be done. You know, we've heard talks about actually finally passing an infrastructure bill, something that communities like mine in Hawaii, communities all across the country are in dire need of. We have to put the well-being of the people first in this country and do what it takes to deliver results for them.
But how much of this do you think is posturing right now, and how much do you think it is personal?
I don't know, and frankly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we in this country as leaders have a mandate to fulfill the vision that our founders laid out for us, to have a government that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. Not for the Democrats, not for the Republicans, not for the rich and powerful, for the people. And so we've got to be able to come together, whether the differences are personal or whatever it is, set aside those differences and actually put the people of this country first.
Congresswoman, the American people saw what they saw this week was nothing getting done in Washington. There was this planned meeting at the White House. It was supposed to get something done on infrastructure. That was the plan. But Nancy Pelosi took to the microphone early that morning, accused the president of a crime. The president responded in the Rose Garden shortly after. I mean, for the American people, they saw nothing getting done on those important issues you just mentioned.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. You know, I can speak as a soldier. I've served in the Army National Guard for over 16 years. I've deployed twice to the Middle East, and something that I've appreciated so much throughout my time in service with my fellow service members, people who come from across the country, different ideological spectrum, different politics, different race, ethnicity, religion, orientation, but we all serve one mission, and that is serving the interest of the American people. That kind of focus on service, putting service above self, is what our country's leaders so desperately need.
Which is also why you want the nomination, which I'll get to in a moment here. But again, the big news today is the president ordered all the intel chiefs to cooperate with Bill Barr, AG. And we're probably going to see some of these documents, perhaps sooner rather than later. How curious are you to know about the FISA court and Carter Page and the surveillance of George Papadopoulos and the James Comey meeting at the Trump Tower in January of 2017?
I think the truth is most important to come through. I think we've seen both in some of the examples that you've raised, but also previous examples of how the FISA court and this system is not working in the best interest of the people of this country. We have a one-sided system, really, that does not represent any voice or any protection for the civil liberties and privacy of the American people. This is something that I've been working on with fellow Democrats and Republicans to try to bring about some real change and real
Would you
reforms.
consider a private citizen at the time a candidate for the White House to be in that same category, that being Donald Trump?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you were talking about affording everyday people their civil liberties and make sure they're protected by the system of justice.
Yeah, of course.
Do you put him in that same category?
Of course, the rights that every single one of us have that are afforded to us under the Constitution must be upheld and protected. Those include the Fourth Amendment rights to our civil liberties and privacy.
I know you have some strong thoughts, meanwhile, on how to proceed with escalating tensions with Iran. Here's the president on that yesterday, and I'll ask you about it after.
They're a nation of terror, and we won't put up with it. The deal that was signed by President Obama was a horror show. It's a terrible deal. The minute I collapsed that deal and terminated it, Iran went in a very bad direction. They're now suffering massive problems financially. They have inflation that's about the highest in the world.
How should the United States proceed, Congresswoman?
Well, let's talk about where we are now. We're unfortunately and very concerningly on the brink of war with Iran. These escalating tensions have brought us here. And like I said, my experience as a soldier, having deployed twice to the Middle East, service in Congress on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services Committees for over 6 years, I'm very familiar with the region, the cost of war, and where this path leads us. And the American people need to understand how devastating and costly such a war would be, how it would impact almost every part of our lives. It would undermine our national security. It would strengthen terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. It would take a terrible human toll, the cost of countless American service members' lives, my brothers and sisters in uniform, the cost to civilians in the region, increasing the refugee crisis across Europe. And it would cost trillions of dollars that would come out of our pockets, taxpayers' pockets, to pay for this endless war, resources that we would not be able to use for things like rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure.
And to build on that and to prevent that as a deterrent, will you give this administration credit for squeezing groups that are offshoots that are supported by the Iranian government? Just a report this morning suggesting Hezbollah and Hamas are reaching out to get more funding and money because they're being strangled. Would you give them that?
Well, the decisions that this administration has taken towards Iran have made things worse, not better. They have made our country, the American people, less safe, not more secure, by pulling out of this Iran nuclear deal. That there are some flaws and there are concerns that should have been addressed separately while maintaining and upholding the Iran nuclear deal to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Instead, by the Trump administration pulling out from this deal, they've essentially given Iran an excuse to be able to restart this Iran nuclear weapons program, which is something that they've started talking about, something that makes us and the world far less safe. So as president, I would re-enter the Iran nuclear deal.
Okay.
I would work out the differences separately outside of that and de-escalate the tensions that are unfortunately bringing us to the point where we are at a brink of war with Iran today.
I appreciate your position. Let's see how it works out. On 2020, here we go.
Finally, I want to look at the Monmouth University polling, Congresswoman, if we can. 2020 Democratic presidential candidates. Joe Biden, clearly still the front runner there, leading by double digits over Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, and Beto O'Rourke. You are not on that screen because you're still polling in the single digits. How do you plan to make your move?
We're bringing our message directly to the American people, and that is a message of putting the well-being and the interests of the American people first and foremost, ahead of partisan interests, ahead of corporate interests, ahead of interests of other countries, and making this commitment to them that as president, I will end these wasteful regime change wars, whether it's against countries like Venezuela, Iran, or Syria. Work to end this new Cold War that we are in with ever-increasing tensions between the United States and nuclear-armed countries like Russia and China, and end this nuclear arms race and take the trillions of dollars that we would continue to spend on these wars and weapons if we continue down the path we are on, and take those dollars and put them back in the pockets of the American people. Use those dollars to serve the needs of the American people.
We are out of time, but we certainly appreciate yours today. Hope you have a good Memorial weekend. Thank you.
Same to you both.
Tulsi Gabbard out of Washington, D.C.